Dear students, greetings of the day. Today we will study Types of Fullness Part 2. Objectives: to acquire knowledge on different types of fullness, to familiarize with the control of fullness in garments, to know about the suitability of various types of fullness for different age groups, fashion trends, etc. Gathers and shirrs. Gathering is an effective and decorative way of distributing fullness over a given area. Gathers are graceful folds of fabric that provide fullness, suggesting a soft look, which can be made using machine or hand stitches. These are formed by drawing the fabric together on a line of stitching and may be used to control the fullness at round waist, yoke lines, waistlines, necklines and upper and lower edge of sleeves. The amount of fabric required may be 2 to 2.5 times more than the gathered width of the garment. Gathering is done in different methods. Gathering by hand, it can be made by stitching 2 rows of running stitches of 0.25 centimeters length close together. Gathering by machine. It is a much faster process of making gathers as compared to hand method and requires less skill. To make gathers using machine, mark seam line on the right side of the fabric by adjusting the machine for long stitch and loosening the upper tension slightly. Make 2 rows of small stitches on either side of the seam line on the area to be gathered, leaving longer thread to facilitate pulling of the fabric to become gathers. As upper tension is made loose, the bobbin thread can easily be pulled, making the fabric to gather. The length of the stitch depends on the fabric type. Firm and closely woven fabrics require longer stitch. Gathering by using elastic. Gathers can be made by stretching an narrow strip of elastic and stitching on the part of the garment which is to be gathered. Shirring or gauging. Shirring is a method of altering the fabric texture by making several rows of gathers, 3 or more. The rows should be evenly spaced. Shirring appears as a decorative feature at the shoulder, waistline, at the lower edge of a sleeve and usually at the narrower parts of garment, also allowing a certain degree of stretching. The entire section of the garment may also be shirred for decorative effects such as yoke and pocket. Shirring can be done by these methods. Thread shirrs. These are made by similar procedure of making gathers but more number of rows. Pull the bobbin threads of all the rows and distribute the fullness evenly to the exact size required. The upper and bobbin threads should be knotted at the back. Elasticized shears, as the name indicates, elastic is used for pulling the threads to form gathers. To make gathers using elastic, use an elastic fabric of 0.5 cm wide and length equal to 3/4 length of ready width of the shirred fabric. To make uniform shears, the fabric and the elastic strip should be divided into equal parts. Increase the stitch length. Stretch the elastic evenly between the marking points and stitch in the center of the elastic. Elastic threads can also be made instead of elastic strip. The serviceability of the shirring depends on the firmness of the elastic used. Smocking. Smocking is a type of fabric enrichment, consisting of tiny embroidery stitches sewed over the folds of gathers at regularly spaced intervals on the right side of the fabric. It is used to hold fullness or to add texture and surface interest to a bodice or yoke, neckline or sleeves of children's or women's dress. Soft and flat-faced fabrics such as voiles, cambric and crepes are highly suitable for smocking. A medium weight and firmly twisted thread of cotton or silk is used for smocking. Gathering fabric. It is simple to produce smocking when correct procedure is being followed. Marking with a series of dots on the wrong side is required for smocking on a plain material. These dots should be evenly spaced, around 0.3 cm apart, and the distance between the rows may be 0.5 - 1 cm. For heavy fabrics the distance can be more. Fabrics with checks, plaids or dots do not require the transfer of the pattern. Using strong thread, pick up the dots along one row and make several running stitches along. Complete all the rows. The number of rows depends on the area to be covered. The width of fabric should be 3 times as long as the gathered fabric for smocking area. Draw up the fabric on the threads and fasten the thread ends by winding them together round the pins placed at one end to hold them securely. Stitches used for smocking. Good quality embroidery threads of suitable color are used for smocking. All the stitches are worked from left to right. Outline stitch. This is like a stem stitch used to make outlines. Work each row over the tubular fabric folds. Take out needle on the first fold on the extreme left by making small back stitch over the fold. While making the stitch, always keep the thread under the needle. Draw up each fold firmly, after each stitch. Cable stitch or herringbone stitch. It is a variation of outline stitch done in 2 close rows. Start in the same way as for the outline stitch. While taking stitch, keep the thread above the needle for the first stitch and below the needle for the second, and repeat throughout the length of the row. Wave stitch. To make wavy effect, make odd number 5, 7, 9 of outline stitches diagonally upward and then downward. For the upward row, keep the thread below the needle, and for the downward row, keep the thread above the needle. Repeat the process to make rows of diamond shapes or rows of wavy design. Chevron. This type forms zigzag stitches over the folds. Take a stitch on the first pleat at the left of a row of gathering stitches, pass the needle down to the next row of gatherings and take another stitch in the same first fold. Then, over the same fold, take a stitch on the second fold, inserting the needle to the right. Bring it down between the first and second pleat. Keeping the thread below the needle, draw this stitch up so that the two pleats are held closer. Then pass the needle up to the first row, take a stitch over the second pleat, with the thread above the needle, take a stitch over the third pleat, bringing the needle out between the second and third pleat and draw the stitch tight. Make the second row of zigzag stitches in such a way that its points meet the points of the second row, followed by the fold on the third row to form diamond design. Honeycomb smocking. This type of smocking resembles the honeycomb, hence the name. To start with, bring the needle out in first pleat, take 2 tiny back stitches over fold to secure the thread. Pull the needle through the first fold about 0.5 centimeters below the first stitch, keeping the thread above the needle. With thread below the needle, put the needle through the second fold at the same level. Draw the thread tightly together. Put the needle through the same fold at the same level as the first stitch. With thread above the needle, put the needle through the third fold at the same level. Draw tightly together. Repeat till the end of the row. French smocking is a method of holding the fullness widthwise and lengthwise. In this type of smocking, the stitches are not seen on the right side of the fabric, but it assumes a desired shape. Twice the length and width of the fabric is required to produce this type of smocking. A dotted pattern on the wrong side is required to draw the corners of a square together to produce desired shapes on the right side of the fabric. Flares. Flares are introduced usually into skirts and sleeves, for adding fullness and decoration. Flare in a basic skirt is the difference between its measurements at the hemline and hipline. Circular skirts, made from a complete circle of fabric, have the maximum flare. To introduce flare into a basic paper pattern for a skirt, make slashes starting from the hemline and stopping just up to the waistline. The slashes should be regularly spaced around the hem. Spread out each slash and pin both edges to another sheet of paper placed underneath. The space spread between the two slashed pieces will decide the amount of flare present. Flare is introduced into garments by gauze, gauze or making circular patterns. Frills or ruffles. A ruffle, frill, or furbelow is a strip of fabric, lace or ribbon tightly gathered or pleated on one edge and applied to a garment, bedding, or other textile as a form of trimming. These are used for the purpose of adding decoration to a garment. Sometimes they are used at the hems of skirts and dresses to add length. Ruffles may be found at the sleeve edges, necklines, armholes etc. To make frills, allow at least 1.5 times the length of the piece to which the frill will be attached. The width of the frill is usually anything from 1 inch to 3 inches. The longer side should be cut along the lengthwise grain of the material for proper drape. The gathered edge of the frill can be concealed in a seam, facing, binding or wide band. Guddets. These are wedge-shaped extra panel of fabric which are set into a skirt so that the wide side of the wedge becomes a part of the hem of the skirt. Flouncy, springy patterns often use guddets, which also allow more freedom of movement on the part of the wearer. Any type of fabric can be used in a good skirt, although some fabrics may perform better than others. The gud may be set into a seam of the skirt, or the skirt may be slashed so that the slashed edges form the seams joined into the gud. A gud is inserted in the bottom of a skirt, starting at least halfway down the skirt and sometimes further. This facilitates snug fitting of the skirt at hip level and provide flower when it reaches knees and finally the bottom hemline. Generally, multiple guddets are inserted into a skirt at set intervals. The distribution of the guddets throughout the skirt gives the skirt a rippling effect. A single large gud may be used in the back of the skirt to make it more comfortable to walk in. The guddets can be made from the same material as the skirt, or they can be sewn in contrasting fabrics or colors for a distinctive look. Lightweight fabrics are generally used for making guddets, otherwise the skirt becomes heavy.